best practice accounting protocols for the quantification of carbon offsets. Also, perhaps in terms of certifying verifiers or certifying registries that could serve this market without directly providing, controlling the market or providing direct regulation.
George?
Well, it's all about money, right? If you buy carbon credits from a hybrid car vehicle producer, right, you buy a hybrid vehicle, you pay about $5,000 extra for the hybrid vehicle over the gas version of that vehicle. It doesn't emit about 2 tons of carbon dioxide per year, but you paid $5,000 up front for it. If you buy carbon credits from trees and ocean projects around the world, you might pay about $5 a ton for it. So not everybody can afford to go out and buy a brand new automobile with a $5,000 premium on it to reduce their carbon footprint by 2 tons a year. But everybody can afford to plant enough trees to get 2 tons a year. That's $10 a year. Everybody can afford to do that. A family of 4 in the United States has a carbon footprint of about 20 tons per year. At $5 a ton that tree planting projects are selling in that, that's about $100 a year. That's $8.33 a month. So, buy Mother Nature 1 cheap cocktail a month, and you've taken care of her. Now, people who don't like offset projects, who want the high-priced, engineered solutions, are very opposed to this. But it's part of the solution, and it also heals the harm that's done. So, and everybody can afford it. So the voluntary market to choose these affordable, low-end solutions, the green solutions, is a very practical step.
Well, I can tell you, Mr. George, if you're talking about hiring a tree, I think some of my foresters in Tennessee have a lot of trees they'd like to hire out for you. Now, you're a for-profit company.
Yeah, we're a for-profit public company.
And you are looking to increase and stabilize your income stream. So do you think that the entrepreneurial spirit that we have in the country, the entrepreneurial spirit we're seeing around this industry, coupling that with an increased environmental awareness by American families and certainly by organizations and companies could drive the voluntary carbon offset market without burdensome government regulation?
Yeah, I do, and we're somewhat of an anomaly. We're an American entrepreneurial activity. We do all of our science here, and virtually 100% of our money comes from Zurich and London.
So you would leave government out of voluntary carbon offset market, and Mr. Broekhoff says he thinks that it would be helpful in establishing.
I'd love to have the government aboard on this voluntary market. I think it would help. I think people would have more confidence if there was some government oversight. It would make life a lot easier. Heaven help me, sometimes the bureaucracy is a bit burdensome, but it's a positive thing generally.
Okay. Mr. Belcher, I know I'm going to run out of time, and I may submit my question to you. I'm curious about selling electricity through renewable energy, and I had asked you about if you received any government subsidies. And I know that the wind turbine project with the Rosebud, Sue Rosebud, did receive some, and I know there was a DOE grant and I think a rural development grant in that. So I've got some questions surrounding that. If you will, sir, I will submit those to you in writing for an answer in writing from Native Energy. And I think it's important for us to look at whether or not this is something that is sustainable and something that is going to be profitable and doable and duplicative. So that it can be replicated. So let's, I do have some questions about that. I will go ahead and yield back my time and then submit that in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
General Lady's time has expired, and we ask the panel to respond in writing to the General Lady's questions when she propounds them. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Cleaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, Mr. George, you partially answered this question. The several estimates suggest that the average American family generates 20 tons carbon dioxide annually, and I think about 4.5 for the rest of the world.
The rest of the world's much lower.
Yes. And then you talked about the the fact that to buy an automobile that actually generates less greenhouse gas contributors will cost more money. Do you think that the reverse ought to be the case in the United States? In other words, that you essentially pay more money if you buy a large emitter. If you want a big SUV, you pay more for that than you would pay for buying a hybrid. Because right now, it's, if you're trying to be environmentally sensitive, it costs you more money. And so, just like cigarettes cost more money, if you want to, go ahead and smoke in spite of the hazards and the way you contribute to the rising health costs in the country, okay, it's going to cost you $4 a pack. Is it clear enough?
Yeah, I think sure. If you larger footprint items, ought to pay their way, right? And hopefully that recently we had an owner of a large mega yacht. It's kind of like the most extreme example of an object that somebody might own. And they contacted us because they were tied up next to our research ship. It's down in Florida picking up scientific gear. And it's just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, polished to a high polish. And the owner of the yacht, I was drinking coffee on our research ship one morning, and he was drinking coffee on his, and we were literally tied together. So we could almost touch. And he said, well, tell me about all this carbon sequestration stuff. And I said, well, you tell me about your boat. How many gallons of fuel do you burn? And he told me how many gallons of fuel he burned. And I said, well, let's do the calculation. I just did the back of the envelope calculation. I said, well, if you wanted to reduce the carbon footprint of this 140-foot mega yacht, bigger than our research ship, right, you'd have to pay about $2,000 a year to make that zero by planting trees. And he said, I just paid more than that to varnish the back rail on this boat. Right? And he says, let me get my checkbook out. Right? And he did. So, if it's affordable, people will do this, right? But if you have a 20-ton footprint and you got to pay, effectively $2,500 a ton, right? That's Toyota's charge for your footprint. Well, that's a big number, right? You got to shell out $50,000 to go carbon neutral. Well, some people can afford that. I can't, right? Most people can't afford that. But I can afford $100 a year, right, to do the right thing for the greener solution. And that's why the British Stern report that talked about the need to spend $3 to $4 trillion immediately to address this problem of climate change is such a staggering number. It's because they used that engineering metric to come by that number. If you use the green metric to come by the cost of making a really meaningful part of the solution to climate change, we can afford it easily, right? It's very low cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And it's immediately available, right? We can do it today.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States has historically been the biggest contributor to greenhouse trapping gases in the atmosphere, but that's changing now, and we have some other competitors out there that are going to do at least as good a job as we are of contributing those gases. And I think one of our biggest challenges is to work with those other countries to find ways to cooperate toward reducing our footprint and their footprint at the same time. What lessons can we learn from the voluntary system out there, and maybe moving toward mandatory systems that could be applied, that we could encourage other countries to follow, that may be large contributors in the future? And I'll take an answer from anyone.
Well, I guess I would just point out that under the Kyoto Protocol, part of the idea of having the offset project types be based in emerging markets is precisely to try to stimulate the development of renewable energy and other clean development in those markets, because as they mature and as there's increasing demand for energy in those markets, it would be nice if it was energy that was renewable instead of energy that was based on fossil fuels. So I think that's one very obvious way we can encourage the development of projects in those countries.
You know, in every place in Europe you go, you see an advertisement on the wall put up by some public agency or some organization, giving people an education on how to reduce their carbon footprint. Right? Everywhere you go in Europe, you find that.
I'm not
And-
talking about Europe. I'm talking about Asia.
No, but that's produced this fantastic effect of stimulating thinking. And the Kyoto Accord has been a fantastic success story because its job was to stimulate people to try to think our way, invent our way out of this crisis, and we're doing it.
But it just seems that market-based approach would be the most effective, and if we can produce laws that will be useful in encouraging Asia, in particular, to move forward in this, it would be good to have that input from the market, from you guys.
2.5 months ago, I was in China meeting with several different Chinese government organizations. I was given tours around China of the tree planting that's going on there, and I'm a tree planter, so I know a new tree when I see one. I saw 25 years of extensive tree planting going on there in China. China and Costa Rica are the only two countries on the planet that are ahead of the game on forestry, planting more trees than they're clearing every year. The Chinese are enormously dedicated to climate change solutions. They're working on it. They are very insular. They don't really talk about it. I was amazed when I met with foresters there who were asking me about how to create carbon credits. I met with one group and they about wind power. Some of these guys here are wind power guys, and they said, well, can you earn a carbon credit with wind power? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, and are you going to put wind power in? They said, yeah, we're looking at 250 megawatts right away, you know, in one little area. And they said, can we earn a carbon credit for that? And I said, well, of course, you know. So those countries are, in fact, actually very working on it. On the other side of the equation, you know, they're burning the nastiest coal on Earth. All the, you know, the mercury that we worry about in tuna in the open ocean, you know, where does it come from? It all comes from Chinese coal pollution, right? That's why mercury suddenly appeared, you know, in the fish world, right? Is that mercury has come from those Chinese coal plants. So we got to shut those things down with other means and for other purposes other than strictly climate change, right?
I mean, to get to your question, I think the rate of development in countries like China, India is going to have to be met with intelligent cap and trade regulations that they're going to have to sign on to spur clean energy technologies and carbon sequestration. I think that they're not going to act. I'm sure if you've talked to them, you know they're not going to act until we take some action ourselves. So I think the first step is the development of a U.S. mandatory regime, and then working with them as quickly as possible to get them to develop a mandatory regime.
You know, in China, every man, woman, and child by law in China has to plant 5 trees per year. That's 6 billion trees per year go in the ground. And everywhere in China where you go, if you're an old tree planter like me, you see that that's going on. I see those trees are in the ground growing. So they're working on it.
Okay, thank you.
Time has expired. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Walton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I'm intrigued, Mr. George, by your comment about what great foresters the Chinese are, because there was an extensive series of articles, or at least one article in the Washington Post recently about all the illegal logging that's going on in China. And despite their rules, they're incapable of enforcing